Well, good morning, everyone, on this very rainy day, and welcome to today's webinar. This event is a collaboration between RiskX and our delivery partner, Sphere RHSM, who are a health and safety consultancy. More about them later. So I'm Nikki Porter. I'm the Managing Director for RiskX, and today I'm joined by Steve Smith, who's the Managing Director of Sphere. And he'll be delivering the main presentation and imparting his valuable expertise on the subject of reducing workplace risk related to hazardous substances. We also have our very own James Sharp, our CTO for RiskX and the founding architect of our software AssessNet, and he'll be presenting some interesting insights into the importance and the relevance of technology when it comes to demonstrating compliance with CoSHH regulations. So it's great to see so many of you join us here today. Because there are quite a few people on the call today, and to help us move through the content quickly, we'll save the Q&A to the end. And as the presentation progresses, if you think of a question or a comment or some feedback, please do submit that into the chat box on your screens. We'll be monitoring those questions and those comments at our end, and we'll aim to get to as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. So before I hand over to Steve, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes introducing RiskX and our market-leading health and safety software AssessNet to you. I know some of you are our clients on today's call, so I will make it brief, but we do have a lot of people on today's call that aren't our clients and therefore won't be familiar with us and what we do. So RiskX was established nearly 20 years ago. In fact, we'll be celebrating our 20th birthday in the summer, and plans for that are underway at the moment. We are an established privately owned business. So we are owned privately by a chap called Mark Delo. And when we started the business, we were a pure safety consultancy business. And today we have grown to be a pure SaaS business. And we service well over 120 businesses across public sector, across private sector, NGOs and charities as well. Our USP is very much about being experts in health and safety. We don't pretend to be enterprise risk management providers. We are very passionate about health and safety. And in fact, we've got over 100 years of health and safety experience within our business. And in fact, our CTO, James, who you'll be listening to later on, is a qualified safety practitioner as well. The secret of our success is absolutely around our high levels of client advocacy and retention. So we've got many clients who've been clients of ours for the last 20 years or so. And you can look at our website for a plethora of case studies and testimonials about how we add value to them. Because we're privately owned, all of our money goes directly back into our product, and we invest continually in enhancing our product and in rebuilding our product. And this year, for example, we will be very soon, actually next month, launching a completely new platform for our mobile apps. And we've also launched recently an open API library. We are UK based, and we're a team based in the UK, based here in not so sunny Milton Keynes today. However, we do service clients of all different shapes and sizes. We're SaaS based, and therefore, because our product's in the cloud, we have lots of users of our system that are based in North America, in Europe, and even Australia. So moving just very briefly on to AssessNet then. I'm only going to spend 60 seconds talking to you about AssessNet, as I know you're all eager to get to the main event. And if you'd like to know more about the product, then put a comment in the box, and we'll make sure that we get back to you afterwards, and we can set up trials and that kind of thing. So AssessNet is SaaS-based and it's modular. And regardless of what modules you adopt, there are several core features that power the system, and they come as standard. And you can see those on the screen at the moment. So we've got 4 main ones. Task Manager is the beating heart of the product. That is what enables us to fully automate all of the workflows, and for you as a user to automate the allocation of tasks and to understand when tasks are overdue or pending, or if there's any trends in how those tasks are being managed. Document Manager is there. It's pretty straightforward. It's there because most of your assessments and your incidents and your safety processes require evidence and documentation, and so there is Document Manager functionality within the product as well. Again, a key reason why people use technology, and James will be talking about this later, is the ability to understand in real time what's happening from a safety perspective in your business. And our dashboards and reporting suite enables you to look at that in real time. And then finally, you want to be able to provide access to all of your employee population and your subcontractors and other stakeholders, so that if they need to download a CoSHH assessment or they need to report an incident, that in one click, they can do that via our portal without having full access or a license to our system. Around that core functionality, we've got about 15, 18 modules. It grows all the time. And so clients can either choose to take one or two modules to manage, let's just say, accidents and hazards, or they can take all of the modules to manage their entire health and safety function within their business. And you can see some examples of those modules on the screen, which includes obviously our CoSHH management one. Our service delivery that wraps up around our software starts off with business intelligence. So yes, we do have dashboards, we do have reports, but for businesses with big data or with the requirement to consolidate all data from all business systems into one reporting tool, we also have business intelligence through a data analytics license as well. I mentioned mobile apps earlier on, and as you can imagine, all of the relevant modules have a mobile app, so that if offline you are in the field and need to download a CoSHH assessment, or you need to report an incident, or you need to carry out an audit, you can do that offline on our mobile app platform. I mentioned earlier on, we've got lots of users in other countries, and even in our own country, there are lots of workers with English as a second language, and therefore we do have a full complement of languages in our product as well. And then finally, recently we have launched an open AI capability, which enables clients to connect our system to other systems, either through open AI or through private API links that we can also produce. So that's all from me right now on RiskX and AssessNet. And now I'm going to move on to introducing Steve from Sphere. So I mentioned earlier on, Sphere is a health and safety consultancy, and they were established like us many years ago. They're headquartered in Peterborough. Stephen Smith on the webinar today is Managing Director and a Chartered Health and Safety Practitioner, and he has huge experience across all sorts of industries over his time in business of helping businesses manage their health and safety and their CoSHH. Steve, as you would imagine, is supported by a fully experienced team of consultants. Many of them are CMIOSH. They have a deep range of cross-industry experience and ensuring that customers are surrounded with the right advice when they need it. Steve is also the founder of Peterborough Biscuit, hence the half-eaten cookie that you can see on your screen. And I'm not going to say any more about that. I'm going to leave that to Steve to explain that one to you. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand you over to Steve.
Thanks, Nikki. So the Peterborough Biscuit is a local business event that we run every year to improve the business community, getting everybody together and talking with each other and getting people to know, because if you don't know business exists, you can't use it. So that's been going since 2017. And we keep that there. It's part of our marketing tool, which has worked really well, but it's also generated over £8 million worth of business locally. So we're quite proud of that. So yeah, I've been in health and safety since the late 90s. I'm a mechanical electrical engineer by trade. And we tend to look at health and safety in a very pragmatic and practical way. So hopefully the slides today will sort of reflect that. So could I have the next slide, please? So we use a very simple 8-step approach. We break things down into manageable chunks. And on the slides today, you'll see a very systematic approach that you can use to actually work out what you've got, where you've got it, who can use it, that type of thing. So if we start with the first step. So what substances do we have? So the CoSHH regulations ask you to manage substances in a way that safeguards your workplace, obviously going back to a safe place of work. So do you know what types of substances that you have? Is this recorded in 1 or 2 documents? Not documented at all? Are those documents up to date? So have we looked at them in the last 6 months, a year, type of thing? Are these documents paper-based or electronic, or a mixture of both? And if you haven't got that in place to start off with, then we need to look at that and we need to put that in place. So next slide, please. So the next thing is, for the substances themselves, are they dangerous? And later on, you'll see a separation table that comes out of a piece of health and safety guidance on dangerous substances and substances in warehouses. So are they stored together? Are they separated? Are they of different classes? Because there are about 8 or 9 different classes of substance. And where physically on site do you store your substances? In one place, in lots of little cabinets like this, in departments? Where do you keep them? Can we have the next slide, please? So what do you need in your business, in your organization? So you need to find that out. And this is where step 3 comes in. So information gathering. And this is probably the one that everybody tends to have a bit of a downer on, because you got to ask questions, and some people probably haven't got the time to give you to find this out. So we need to find out from all departments, all buyers, because if your procurement department is bringing substances in, they'll have a really good idea of what you've bought in the last 12 months, and the main users that you know of, because there might be some that you don't. And there's a usual format request down the bottom there, a request for information, substances stored and used. The stored bit is important, because you may have a substance that is highly flammable that's sat on a shelf for 3 years that's not been used. We need to actually reflect on that. So what substances do you use on a regular basis? How much is used per year? And where do you keep it? Next slide, please, Matthew. So the quantities. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of this. So if you can find out how much you use each month, each quarter, 6 monthly, annually, or infrequently, you can then make a decision on that. And from this information, you can then estimate the total amount needed in any given period, and then the amount needed to be stored on site. So why is this slide important? Why is this important? Well, for us as safety practitioners, we want to try and reduce the risk. So if you can keep your inventory levels as low as possible, you're obviously reducing the risk. It does help cash flow as well. So there's a benefit to this, because you can budgetize the amount of substances you need over a quarter, over 6 months. You've got shelf lives on these as well with some substances. So, and you need to use it within its shelf life, otherwise you're not getting full value. And then you've got another one as well. So there is a shelf life on a substance, but there is also a degrading point of that substance. And they're completely different possibilities. So a shelf life, you might be coming to the end of the shelf life and it's starting to become less effective. The degrade point, it's completely ineffective. So you need to turn around and identify those so you can keep that in place. Next slide, please. So once we've gone through the first 4 steps, we can then work out whether we need to remove it. So our highly flammable substance has been on the shelf for 3 years. Do we actually need it? Can we get rid of it? And really, in this current economic climate, we only want to buy what we need. So that, again, there's a benefit to cash flow on that, but there's also a benefit to reducing the risk in that as well. So we're doing 2 good things there. Next step, please. So Once we've gone through that, and that is a big task, those first 5 steps, quite a large task. There's a lot of investigation involved in that. We can then turn around and work out, can we get a safer alternative, which will benefit everybody. Now, safer alternatives may cost a bit more money, but then you have to turn around and balance that out on what's the difference. So classic example, if you've got some hydrochloric acid in a container and you can change that for an acetic acid, that will be a massive reduction in risk. If you have to keep the substances, but let's be vigilant on future safer alternatives, so that when we can swap them over to a safer alternative, we actually do that. Next step, please. So this is where the storage comes in. The HSE has given us a nice guidance booklet, HSG 71 Chemicals in Warehousing. It's free PDF off their website, and you get this chart, and it's a simple matrix, and it tells you what you can and you cannot put together. So if we look along the top row, you'll see a red diamond on there. That's a flammable substance. If you go all the way along to the diamond that's half red, half yellow, that is a let's just check my chart. That is a organic peroxide, and you must never ever put them two together. So this chart itself is actually functional in the way that your cost sheets need to be made and the way that you store those chemicals. So it's one of those charts that regularly gets missed, but absolutely essential in what you want to do. So where do we store them? Where are these substances stored? How are they stored? And with what other substances are they stored? And if we can get those 3 together, now we're starting to get into a really good place on chemicals. Next slide, please. This is the big one. So we've done all this work. We're going to use it in the business. We've found out how much we've got, where we keep it. We've found out how much we need to use in a set period of time. And now we need to give it to our staff. So how can we communicate all this information to our staff and try and ensure that they do the right thing? So not storing chemicals together that shouldn't be, making sure they understand what protection systems they need to put in place, what spill kits they need. So from my point of view, this is where a proper engagement system works. So we find out what we have, what you need to know to use it safely, how much do we keep on site, and where do we keep it. And a proper CoSHH information system with user engagement will provide all this information. It takes a lot of the problems away, but you have to do quite a bit of work before you get to that point. And at that point, I'm going to go back to Nikki, because that's my bit done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And we have had a few questions, and we'll obviously go through those later. That was really simple and clear as an explanation of the key steps to get to grips with your CoSHH risks. And I think for me, the key takeaway is the importance of communication to ensure that your employees and contractors understand the workplace risks associated with the chemicals and dangerous substances. Okay, so in a linked presentation, James Sharp is now going to discuss his favourite subject, technology, and more specifically, how and why it's important to demonstrating compliance with CoSHH regs. So over to you, James.
Thank you, Nikki. So yes, I'm James Sharp. I'm the Chief Technical Officer here at RiskX and one of the founding software developers many moons ago. Now been at the organisation since day dot and worked in the Technology Centre and also a qualified safety management professional as well, which helps me put these slides together. Next slide, please. So let's have a look at some of the pain points with regards to CoSHH management itself before we have a look at some of the technology behind it and what's out there now. So first of all, as we see there, we've got to identify the substances and activities, and that can be quite a fragmented process across organisations, different departments having different substances and no one understanding what that centrally looks like. We've then got to build up that SDS information and create an inventory, and that's often, again, fragmented. It's in different folders and they're outdated and not getting centrally from suppliers themselves. We need to bring all those in together. And then we need to use that SDS data to streamline assessments. We need to take the SDS data and create assessments off the back of it. And that, so the importance of having good SDS data only puts the quality and confidence within those assessments as well. So we need to bring those in harmony, essentially. As we saw in that last step, publishing to employees, taking that information and making sure that the end user understands those assessments is really important and often missed in safety management. We're very good at creating the records. We're not very good at putting them down to the people that need them and, importantly, gaining their feedback and or agreement that they understand it. And that's an important aspect there as well. And then we have the continued improvement and review. If we're going to have a management system, whether that be on paper or electronically, we need to understand that there's a review process, not just from a regulatory point of view, but also from the point of view that we're understanding the risk and we're making sure the controls are in place. And we're trying to essentially firm those risks or firm those controls and reduce that risk ongoing. So we need that continued improvement to occur, which I'm sure you can agree is harder in an analog process that isn't essentially using technology. So what I'm going to do is have a look at a slide now that looks at those individuals and how technology at the moment is taking that battle and helping people. So identifying those substances, you're now finding that systems can collate those substances centrally into a database, whether that be an Excel spreadsheet, for instance, or an Access or SharePoint, but we're collating them together centrally so that we can understand at least what the inventory looks like across the organisation, as opposed to it being fragmented. The big one being the SDS information and creating that inventory of SDSs. It's also an efficiency saving because if other departments are utilising those substances, you've got this one-stop shop of SDSs, and you can commonly find those on shared drives. There won't just be one folder across the organisation that has them all in, but centrally utilising technology on intranets or internal networks to be able to store those PDF documents centrally, so that if someone does have a substance they need to use, they can find that SDS quite quickly, not just from the assessment point of view, but maybe they want a deeper dive into it for emergency purposes. We've then got to use that information alongside the assessment. So by having them electronic, let's say PDF documents, for instance, or we may have had a supplier who kindly gives you all the SDS information in Excel, that makes it much easier when creating the assessment. Not only do we have essentially one single point of truth of SDSs, so I know that's where I take it from, but at the same time, I can copy, paste, I can utilize that information a lot easier digitally than I could if I was copying, say, a printed off document. And I'm sure Steve knows as well. I do over back in the room, sorry. I think I got cut off there. Am I back, Nikki? Sorry.
You are back, yes.
Sorry, there. The beauty of technology, I am back in the room. So I was on the publishing of assessments of employees. So when we've got that information, we need to make it nice and simple to be able to publish that straight away to end staff. As we have them digitally, if they're on SharePoint services, we can send that information out quite quickly. And across network drives is what we're finding with the way people are utilising technology to centralise that information. Continued improvement and review. As we have them digital, much easier to send it off to people, share it, understand for their review purposes as well. What's actually occurring with that assessment and those controls? Can we see it across the activity at the same time? Slide, please. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into how AssessNet, for instance, as a system that I can bench to when it comes to digitalizing systems into, say, the cloud and software services. I've taken I took them headings and I've seen how we're doing it at the moment, and actually how management systems take on those tasks. So first of all, we're digitalizing the SDS and centralizing that inventory, taking the SDS data and importing that essentially into the system itself. So it's there as clear text, so it's much easier to utilize through the assessment process. We've got advanced search filtering. If we have that in a database format within the search, it's easier for us to look at hazard phrases, safety phrases, danger words. We can very quickly and easily say, well, I want to know a certain type of signal. I can see what that is. I want to see if certain assessments are associated to SDSs. I can see that as well because it's all centrally databased. And then review usage across the organization. As assessments are being created and essentially connected to SDSs, we can instantly see from those SDSs how many assessments have been created, how many activities are coming off the back of that as well. Next slide, please. Then we have our CoSHH assessment process. So of course we have this SDS digitally, which makes it then a lot easier to create the assessment. We can extract data directly from the SDS into an assessment process online, meaning that the assessor is saving an awful lot of time when creating the assessments themselves and building those up. Hazard phrases and labeling and so forth can be automatically generated into the assessment for them to review, saving you a lot of time and effort. EH40 and CoSHH Essentials, you can take the system further when you've got it digitalized, and you can start bringing in external tools such as EH40 for workplace exposure limits and CoSHH Essentials grading as well, making that an automated process and also in real time and live. So we know that a workplace exposure limit to an ingredient is correct. And then we're defining the risk and continued action plan. Now we have it electronically. We can connect up actions and controls very easily, which centralize themselves into Task Manager, as you heard from Nikki earlier, meaning that they're not lost. Review dates and actions are very easy on PC, even on Word documents, but not necessarily have they got a schedule then that sits behind that's proactively prompting individuals to look at those actions. Next slide, please. Then we can publish the assessment. And this is where the real power comes in at digitalizing assessments, especially in a cloud-based environment where it can be globalized very quickly. It means that we can share assessments directly to employees, a very quick and easy link on the intranet that they can click, a QR code that they can scan, and it takes them straight to the assessments that they need to view, all in real time, all signed off and vetted by a professional assessor. But we can provide that real-time access to an SDS inventory as well. So not just the CoSHH assessment, they can actually look at the SDS inventory at the same time. This is really useful for if they are going to be utilizing a substance and they can't find the CoSHH assessment, they could look to see if the SDS is there and prompt an assessor to create the assessment. And then last but not least, one of the hardest things to do in safety management is gaining that sign-off of individuals that they've understood and read the assessment. Well, with digitalization, you can do that straight away. When they look at the assessment, it can be prompted that they provide their name and signatory to say that they've read and understood the assessment and mark that in the assessment process itself. So gaining that level of compliance off the back. Next slide, please. And the last slide is that continued review. Any management system would just be a glorified document storage service if it didn't have a method of reviewing and compliance. So we have dashboards, we have information and data, we can centralize actions and notifications. As things occur in actions and control measures, they can centralize themselves into task management and then notify individuals. And management can look down on that and see if actions are being undertaken and if there's escalated to other people, taking on that management of compliance and continued review. We can alert assessors of change. If an SDS changes in the system, it can alert all assessors that a reassessment is required, taking the pain essentially out of another department, essentially collaborating in the organization and saying, actually, I've got a new SDS for that substance now, and across the whole organization, everyone is notified that a new one is on the system which they can use to reassess. And then providing real-time reports, a robust way of compliance in real time, and system having multiple levels of report, whether it be in the modular based or the individual or managers, being able to understand if they've got assessments overdue, if they've got assessments to create, and where their actions lie with regards to their expiry dates. So providing a very holistic way of managing safety, and especially with regards to the steps that Steve's gone over in CoSHH management side, and making that a little less painful by digitalising the process. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks, James. I never fail to enjoy listening to you talk about health and safety tech. And I hope the rest of today's audience also found it insightful too. So just a couple of minutes talking to you about CoSHH Plus, our new CoSHH managed service, before we then head on to some Q&A. So in a nutshell, CoSHH Plus is a fully managed service whereby we take responsibility to create, review, and also maintain your CoSHH risk assessments on your behalf, and then making them available to you via our AssessNet software. So let's briefly go through the 6 key steps of this service. So step 1, this is where we carry out an on-site walk around and an initial view of your substance inventory. Typically, it's a one-day visit. It isn't a deep dive. It's having an eyes on your operations to understand the context of how substances are used in your business. And then we move on to step 2. And this is when we perform the deeper dive gap analysis, and we do that remotely. And this is very much a detailed review of your substance inventory line by line. After we've done that, we will then output a gap analysis report to you. So this will show you things like the basic information, like the volume of CoSHH assessments that you need to be imported and updated and reviewed and categorized into AssessNet. And that categorization bit's really important, because you might have 1,700, 2,000 substances, and maybe only 50 of those are significant in terms of the risks that they present. But how do you get to those 50? And that's what this gap analysis will do. It will help you to categorize your assessments in your inventory into levels of risk, and to help you prioritize and plan how to reduce those risks, either by using alternative substances or adding additional control measures. And then we move on to step 4. And that's when our advisors through our delivery partner at Sphere will create the CoSHH assessments in AssessNet. They'll link them with the manufacturer safety data sheets to automatically drop relevant information into the CoSHH assessments. And then when the upload and the creation process has been completed, you'll have real-time access via the dashboards to then see the current risk levels of your CoSHH assessments, as well as the individual risks associated with each one. And we often find that's where there's quite a lot of surprises for people who hadn't realised that in particular workshops there were bottles of chemicals under workbenches, etc. And then we move on to step 5. So once your CoSHH assessments have been overhauled and they've been digitised, and you're on top of them and you know where your risks are, you can choose to either take responsibility to take on board the ongoing review and management of them in-house, and our work is done to an extent, or you can say, actually, we'd like to mitigate that compliance risk to you, for you to carry on doing that for us, please. And we will take that responsibility for the ongoing review and updating of your CoSHH assessments, and to change them and update them within the system on your behalf. And that brings me on to the final step, step 6, which is a dedicated CoSHH helpline. So you can contact the CoSHH helpline for specialist CoSHH advice at any stage, or to request new assessments. So we always know that new substances are being added to your inventory all the time. And when those new substances come into play, you can pass them to us to write the CoSHH assessments and populate the system with the SDS into the AssessNet platform for you. And we can offer all sorts of sort of short-term turnarounds on that if required as well. So we are running out of time. I'm going to stop there so that I can move on to the Q&A, because we've had a fair few questions coming in. So I'll go through those with you now. If we don't get time to go through all of the questions, or you think of a burning question afterwards, then please do come back to us after the event. The last slide will have our contact details on it, and we will be in touch with you, I'm sure, as well. Okay, so while Steve and James were presenting, I've been monitoring the questions, and we've got time to look at them now. So first off then, and I think I'll ask Steve this question first. What do I do if I don't have a working inventory of substances in the workplace, Steve?
First thing you've got to do is do the investigation, I'm afraid. So you know exactly what you've got, when you've got it, and what you need. It's basically the first sort of 6 steps that we've gone through today. Because without that inventory, how do you know that your staff are using them properly and that they're actually using them in a safe way? So for me, that's the hard bit. If you've not done this on a gradual sort of system where you've bought new substances in, so therefore you've then gone on and produced that inventory, that's the place you've got to start at. It's the first thing the HSE will ask for if something goes wrong. Have you got an up-to-date CoSHH inventory?
Okay, so assuming you don't, then where is the best place to start looking for this?
So you can have a walk around the site for a start and see what people are using. That's always a good thing to do. You could go into your purchasing department and ask them what they've bought in the last year, 2 years. There will be areas that heavily use substances, and you will know that from that walk round. So I'd do that to start off with, and then I'd turn around and start asking the questions. So on one of the slides, there's a simple format that you can then put into each department and take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So we've got an FM company who's asked us a question. Our business works in FM. We allow sites to buy substances locally. How can I manage this from an inventory perspective?
That is extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. So if you take it to the worst case scenario and somebody gets ill health or injury from it, as a business, as an organisation, you are responsible for ensuring that the safety side of this is put in place before they actually use the substance. Now, if you're using similar substances, so let's say you were using some form of silica out of a tube, then quite a lot of those substances are very similar in their CoSHH profile. So you could probably do 2 or 3 CoSHH assessments on them, make sure that they are all similar, and then go from there. That's a guess, though. So in reality, it is a very difficult one. If you're using the same substance, if you go into shops and you're buying the same substance, then you obviously do the CoSHH assessment on that substance, and that's what you go for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
but it is difficult.
There are 2 other points there, aren't there? One is it all starts with your procurement policies and processes. And secondly, it talks about communication, and that's where digitization comes into play. So if you've got sites spread all over the place and they all do different things, then if there's one portal and one system to go into to check whether that substance is in the inventory and to go through a formal process through the system to request a CoSHH assessment,
if you're on reactive maintenance, this is quite difficult, to be honest with you, because the guys have gone out, they want to get the job sorted, they want to put the maintenance in place so that a leak stops or whatever. So that is quite a difficult one.
And I guess also if the company works in FM, they're servicing all sorts of different types of businesses with all sorts of different operations that require all sorts of substances. So technology, communication, and procurement policy are key there, aren't they?
Yeah.
Does the system accommodate 2-pack substances?
Yes, it would, essentially. Not only from the point of view of the amount of information that you can do during the assessment and the customization of that, it's as strong as the SDS, but a lot of that will also be down to the assessor and the process and what it's being utilised, especially with isocyanates and so on as well. But it would accommodate that through the assessment process. Steve, have you got anything further on the 2K product?
What was that, sorry? Okay.
Mute. Here we go. So you'd potentially have 3 CoSHH assessments for that 2-pack. So you'd have one for each of the packs. So that's 2. And then when you put them together, sometimes their properties change. You'd have to turn around and look to the manufacturer for a start to see if he's putting everything in this 2-pack substance on one material safety data sheet. And you'd have to make your determination on that. I've seen it where there is just a single safety data sheet for both packs. I've seen it where there's 2. So you're in the hands of the manufacturer, I'm afraid. So yeah, it's that can be an interesting one.
Okay. James, a question for you. With CoSHH, do you recommend that risk assessments are printed as if they're needed really quickly in the event of an incident? You might not have time to wait for a computer to load.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. And that will come down to various things, whether it be the risk involved, the substance, and the nature of how they're utilising it and where. If they feel that that's a requirement that would be useful for them as a control measure because they need to act fast, then I would suggest they've probably got emergency action plans and so on already built in to accommodate such substances that would be that volatile. With regards to the systems themselves, a lot of organisations, especially with it being internet-based and there being such levels of connectivity now, they have quick terminals to be able to get safety information because it does more than obviously CoSHH. You might want to report an incident, for instance. And so our portal service, which we discussed when it was sharing records to employees, has a huge level of redundancy so that the system is always live, it's always there, and it's very, very responsive for that reason. So in general terms, no, you wouldn't necessarily need to, but I would think from a risk assessment point of view, it would be down to the risk level itself and the location of that individual if you feel you wanted to print it, and you can easily download and print them.
Okay. I think there were 2 other considerations there, aren't there? And one is, as soon as it's printed, it's not updated in real time. So you need to make sure that if it's used, you're very clear that it has been reviewed and updated appropriately. And I think the second point is that providing access via portals very quickly and easily is absolutely key for the use of CoSHH risk assessments in emergency situations.
There is another one, I'm afraid. So when a major incident happens, people usually do one of 2 things. They either go into automaton mode, in which case they know exactly what they're doing, or they'll panic. And if the user isn't been using the terminal or the QR codes or the system on a regular basis, then they can sometimes get themselves in a right tiswas trying to actually get the information out. So if you decide you want to purely use the system without printing the documents off, it's really, really important that people are trained on how they get into the system and use it. Because they will press the wrong buttons at the wrong time because they're in panic mode.
Yeah, I mean, the whole subject of psychological impact on safety is another topic that is really interesting to look at another time. I've got a construction company here who's asked a question about roofing batons, Steve. So roofing batons are treated, but when requested, what substance is used, nobody knows. It tends to leach and cause skin irritation. Any advice appreciated? I'm not sure if that's too specific.
No. What you can do, I think Rory put that in. I think what you can do, Rory, is really simple. You can go back to the roofing company and you can ask them to provide you with the material safety data sheet for the substance, or you can go to the HSE if you're not getting anywhere, and you can let the roofing company know that you're going to inform the HSE because they have a duty to tell you what substance is on that baton. Now, treating wood with substances so they don't rot can have substances like arsenic in it and other nasties. and if you see the actual treatment processes, they're not very environmentally friendly at all. So you might have to use a big stick to try and get these organisations to give you what you need.
Okay, thank you. A question on safe alternatives here. Have you got any tips, Steve, on keeping abreast of any new emerging safe alternatives that come out into the market?
So you can use the biggest search engine in the world to find this out at zero cost to you. If you go into Google and you type in, so for instance, if you're using a substance like dichloromethane and you want to know if there's a safer alternative, you can type that literally long search engine question into Google and put, is there a safer alternative than dichloromethane ? And that will sift it through for you. You can go on specific sites that are out there, but they're all linked to the companies that make the product. So again, and they will do quite a lot of marketing on this as well. So for me, if you don't want to spend any money on this, I would use something like Google or Bing or something like that to start off with, and then you might find that specific chemical companies are actually turning around and helping you with that.
Thank you. And one more question, Steve. Is it a legal requirement for CoSHH symbols to be displayed on vehicles?
So if you've got a big bulk tanker going around the country, the answer is yes. Especially for like corrosives and things like that. But there are other CoSHH symbols that need to be displayed on vehicles for things like pressurized gases. The legal requirements for vehicles basically based on how much quantity that you are taking in that vehicle. So if you've got 5 litres of an acid in there, then no, you wouldn't do it. If you had 250 litres, you probably would. So again, but pressurized cylinders are the ones that regularly come to mind for CoSHH symbols, but the rest of it just depends on your quantity.
Okay, thank you. So we have had a few questions coming in that are very specific about our system itself from our clients. So rather than go through those questions right now, what we will do, and I've got a record of who's asked the questions and what the questions are, somebody will come back to you directly answering those questions for you in the next, certainly by the end of tomorrow. If it's any more urgent than that, then message us in and we'll get to it quicker than that. Okay, so that concludes today's webinar, and I hope you found it all very interesting and worthwhile. I, for one, thought going back to basics, Steve, and just going back to the simplicity of things that we might know, but just taking some time to stand back and look at the basic fundamentals is really helpful. You will receive, everybody, whether or not you attended or whether or not you just registered, you will receive a copy of the recording for this webinar shortly later on today. Do feel free to pass it on to any colleagues. If you've got any questions about either the event today, the subject matter of CoSHH, our system, or anything else, then please do email us. You can see our email addresses on the screen right now. And there is more information on our new CoSHH Plus service on our website as well, and the web link is on there as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thanks very much again for your time. Goodbye.